what's up guys? Hope you had a good weekend. Perhaps not the most exhilarating Singapore Grand Prix, was it? But as ever in Formula One, there's still plenty to talk about. Thank you very much for all of your questions this week and this weekend. Roll the sting. Pharrell can wait. Loads of questions as ever this week. Really appreciate them, as I always say. I'm going to start with perhaps the most obvious question about yesterday's Singapore Grand Prix. What on earth happened to Ferrari's strategy? And there are a couple of questions. Matt on Twitter says, do you think it's time Ferrari reassessed their race strategy team, as Singapore wasn't the first time they made a poor strategy call that had cost them the chance at a win? And also Will says, is it fair to say that this season, more than last year, Ferrari have been losing it more than Mercedes have been winning it? So two-part answer, I guess. First of all, let's answer the second bit. I think Ferrari have lost a number of races where they clearly should have won, and they've done that through a combination of things. Some of it has been their own strategic errors. We've had driving errors, haven't we? We've had operational errors, but also you've got to say Mercedes are doing a lot of things very, very well, right from the drivers in terms of particularly Lewis, of course, at the top of his game right now. Mercedes seem to have a very good approach to this season, very kind of analytical, very methodical. When they have made errors, they have absolutely admitted them, and they've gone away and worked incredibly hard to learn from those errors or those mistakes to come back stronger. You can see that that's happening. They have, take Singapore as an example, the last few years it's been a real bogey track for them, a little bit like Monaco was a couple of seasons ago, and they went away and they just didn't stop until they understood why. And they turned up this weekend with a different approach in terms of strategy and tyre usage, and it works for them. They switched their car on at this particular circuit that they haven't really been able to do before to the same extent. So Mercedes are doing a lot of things very well. Ferrari are making a few errors as well. Combine the two and it really highlights some of the shortcomings of Ferrari, I guess. In terms of their strategy department, look, I thought it was an absolute blunder yesterday. And I know this is always easy to say in hindsight, and I hate criticising Formula One teams for making those kind of split-second decisions because I know how hard they can be to make. There's a huge amount of pressure. The time window sometimes that you get to make them is minuscule, and I can't begin to describe how difficult they are to get right consistently, and that says a lot about the teams that do get them right consistently. But Ferrari yesterday, I thought it was such a strange call to pit Sebastian Vettel when they did and go for an undercut where the hypersoft tyre that Lewis and Seb were still on at that point, because they'd had the safety car period and because they've been running at a massively reduced pace to prolong that tyre life as best they could, there was so much performance left in the hypersoft tyre of Lewis Hamilton, and Sebastian and Ferrari would have known that because they were running behind him at this reduced pace. And so the undercut was never going to work, because the moment Sebastian pitted, Lewis just unlocked all of the pace that he had left in that hypersoft tyre, blitzed the lap away, and emerged with a healthy gap over Sebastian. And in the end, on top of that, Ferrari timed it wrong and brought Sebastian out behind Sergio Perez, which cost him 2 laps of very slow running. So those are the kind of things that look so obvious now, of course. At the moment on the pit wall and when they were making those decisions in that split second, of course they had other ideas. They were rolling the dice, they were gambling to try and get him in front of Lewis, but it seemed like such a long shot. I'm very surprised they made it. And that to me seems to be a little bit symptomatic of Ferrari's year. It's becoming ever so difficult now, isn't it? 40 points, the difference between the two. Absolutely not over. All of you who have written to me saying it's all over, it's finished, never write it off at this point. A crash, a couple of a DNF or two for Lewis, and things could very easily swing back the other way. So never write it off until the last moment, but it's definitely looking incredibly difficult, or more difficult, for Sebastian and Ferrari at this point. Right, where are the dogs? Rob Toll says, what a dull Singapore Grand Prix 2018. Would you keep Sergey Sirotkin in a Williams for the rest of the season? He says he wouldn't. Well, actually, I thought Sergey Sirotkin was one of the least dull things about yesterday's race. He was all over the place, wasn't he? Holding up cars, desperately trying to defend on tyres that were way too old. Look, Williams have got a car that is almost impossible to drive. Miles off the pace. And actually, I thought that Sergey Sirotkin didn't do a bad job yesterday, given the strategy that the team put him on, which was an incredibly difficult one to play out. Would I keep him? I mean, look, these questions are never as simple as they might seem, because, you know, there's contracts, there's money, there's all sorts of things to consider. It's not just a case of, right, well, he's not doing that well, let's get him out. I think, yes, I think he will be there till the end of the season. I don't actually think he's doing a bad job. It's very difficult to assess those two drivers right now, isn't it? So, yes, give him a chance. It's his first year in Formula One. Let's let him see the season out and see where it goes from there. Josh Cooper says, it's not about the race, but the Mercedes shark fin. I noticed holes in the top of the shark fin and one more backwards facing. What was your take on these, and what do you think their purpose is? To help with engine cooling, allowing air to circulate, or a more complex reason? It is to do with engine cooling, power unit cooling. Particularly at a circuit like Singapore, they put a bespoke top body on that has those little outlets, those openings opened right out for such a hot race, because they need so much volume of air to flow through the side pod intakes and around the various parts, the radiators, the parts of the power unit, and then they need a big section for it to exit as well. So that's why they fit that at those particular races, and at colder races, you won't see it again, it'll be closed up. Gemma Brown says, do you think it's fair for Force India to consider Sergio Perez for a drive next year after today's actions? Look, I would never deny a driver a drive next year just because of a one single incident like that, or one day. He had a bad day at the office, Sergio Perez, didn't he? He made some errors. I think he knows that. I think he's admitted them as well, which is always good to see. So no, I wouldn't end his Force India career because of it, but I would give him a very serious dressing down if I was the team principal, and I'm sure Otmar Safnauer will be doing just that. You know, he doesn't suffer fools, Otmar, so he will have given him a roasting, I'm sure, back in the team briefing room. And as you now know that they've been banned from racing each other again, we'll see how that goes. But no, to answer your question, Gemma, I don't think he needs his Force India career ending as a result. It was stupid, he knows it. Hopefully they can all move on. And also, don't forget, he brings an awful lot of money into that team. And I know you can argue he may have lost them quite a lot of money in terms of the points that he lost yesterday, which is a fair argument, but the people that back him are fairly influential and fairly good people to have on your side if you're running a cash-strapped Formula One team. Martin Wildgust says, having watched the GP in Singapore, I've got to say I'm not a fan of the interviews of the drivers once they get out of the car. Surely let them get weighed, get a cold towel drink, and then have interviews on the podium like we used to. What are your opinions on this? Well, look, having been in some of these meetings at Sky in the past where these things have been discussed, I totally get what you're saying, because sometimes it's absolute car crash TV, isn't it, when a driver can barely speak when he gets out of the car, or is not composed and doesn't say perhaps what you think he's going to say or what you hope he's going to say. But on the other hand, what you do get quite often is raw emotion. You get raw emotion before they've had the opportunity to be briefed by a team member and to have a few moments to reflect on things. And sometimes, in terms of what makes good television, sometimes those raw emotions, those first initial reactions are often the very best, and the moment he steps out the car is the only opportunity you get to have that. So I understand what you're saying, but personally I think if you take a sort of overhead look at the whole thing, you'll get some better comment as they get straight out of the car, sometimes some more controversial comment as well, than you will do after it's been had some time to be considered up in the up on the podium. There's some Fuka said on YouTube, hey Mark, you spoke about the guys being wedged into the cockpit, which made me think of seat fittings. How do they do it? Are the guys moulded in some way in the buff or are they scanned to form the seat? The seats are moulded around them. What happens is, and I might actually do a video on this because it is quite an interesting process. There are a couple of ways that they do this. There's a few different methods. The very basic method is a sort of giant bin liner that sits inside the cockpit area, huge bin liner which they fill then with expanding foam, literally the sort of expanding foam that you fill gaps around your house with. The driver then sits quickly into that seat, into that bag or on top of that bag, which then of course moulds around and the foam expands into all the areas around him, and you're left with a perfect shape of the driver sitting in the cockpit holding the steering wheel, wearing his race suit, not in the buff. No mechanic ever wants to do a seat fitting with a driver in the buff, believe me. There are now much more advanced ways of doing that as well, but the process is very, very similar. And actually there's a good friend of mine who actually does most of the seat fittings in top level motorsport. So that could be a video on its own. I might look into that, but thank you for your question. Lewis Tyrrell says, I noticed on Sunday during Ted's notebook, whilst all the cars were being pushed back to their respective garages, that the cameras above the airbox had been removed. Do the FIA remove all the cameras after the race? What else do they do to the car after the race before the teams can collect their cars? So yes, FOM, the people who run the camera, the broadcasting side of Formula One, they do remove all of the cameras. The cameras belong to FOM, so the moment that the race finishes, they are the only people allowed into Parc Fermé to start removing those items, and it's only because they need to get them back to service them, to make any changes and updates that they need for the next race, download anything that might be logged on them. So there's nothing else to it than that. They take them all back, and that's the first opportunity they have. It's obviously not a competitive element to the car, so they take them off every single car, so it doesn't cost anybody anything, and it's as simple as that. And when they get to the turn up at the next race, FOM will come along on the Thursday, probably before the race, and fit those cameras back on onto every car again. So it's as simple as that. Nigel Redfern, and this is a question that lots of people have asked, but Nigel Redfern says, given the current driver market, do you see Esteban Ocon missing 2019 but then replacing Valtteri Bottas at Mercedes for 2020, or do you think he'll replace Hamilton in 2021 with his fashion music career and retirement looming? I absolutely think he'll replace Valtteri Bottas in 2020. So yes, I think he'll become a Mercedes reserve driver for 2019, which is a real shame that we won't see him racing. But I think he will absolutely replace Bottas. I think actually, and they'll never say this, but I reckon now that if the situation as it is today was the situation a few months back, I suspect Esteban Ocon would have been replacing Valtteri Bottas for next year. But that deal with Bottas was done a while ago, and I think it was the right thing to do at the time to give Valtteri some security. But Valtteri's had a good shot now. He's had some amazing races. He's put in some great performances, but he's so far off the pace of Lewis Hamilton, just particularly at the moment, and so inconsistent in his performances. Perhaps they would have given Esteban Ocon a shot, but hey, that wasn't to be. But I 100% think the way that Toto Wolff's talking right now, Esteban will be a Mercedes driver, probably at the earliest opportunity they have, which is likely to be 2020. Okay, I think that has to be about it today. I've got a really busy week this week. Today I'm off to Williams for a meeting. Tomorrow, what am I doing tomorrow? I've got a business meeting in the evening tomorrow. Wednesday I'm off to Stockholm, just for the day. Thursday, meetings in London. Friday, doing a talk somewhere up north, Nottingham, I think. So really, really busy week. But look, I love those weeks. They're great. It does mean it's going to be tough to complete the schedule of keeping these uploads coming every single day this week. I will do my very best, but logistics may just make that impossible, but I shall try. Once again, thank you for all your questions and all your comments. As I always say, and I do mean it, I really appreciate them. You taking the time to write. Some of your comments now are getting like essays, and they're great to read. They really are detailed and a lot of thought gone into them, so thank you. Right, that's it. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed this video. Do like it, share it around, and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And I will see you next time.